Welcome to this video about Python and SQLITE. Please guys, remember to subscribe because I will be doing the exact same video with Python combined with PostgreSQL, MySQL, which is MariaDB, and I will also do Python with MongoDB in a set of different videos. So go ahead, subscribe, like this video, write some comments. The only thing I have installed so far in my system is VS Code and Python. If you're not sure if you have Python installed, you can just go to the terminal and you can write py version. And I'm using the latest version for Python as of today, that is version 3.8.2. You can also go to the browser and let me just open a new window here, and then I will show you where to get Python from. Google for Python. Go to python.org and go to the downloads part. Click here and download it. When you are downloading Python, there will be an option in the installation box that says or asks you if you want to add Python to the path. You have to say yes. When you add Python to the path, what you're actually doing is you're allowing to write Python commands from the command prompt from the terminal. So go ahead and download it. Now let me close this window. We don't need it anymore. Since we're going to be doing the CRUD, create, read, update, and delete, the first file that we're going to create is actually the create.py file. In this file, we're going to write to the database. We don't need to download anything. SQLITE 3 is embedded into most systems, and in this case, Python knows how to build the database for us, so no extra downloads for it. Let's do an import, and we're going to import SQLITE 3. We can save, go to the terminal, and now we're going to run this file. So we say py, and then we point to the file that we called create.py. Click enter, and nothing really happens because we don't have anything in this file. If you had a mistake, let's do some access there, save it, and let's run the file. Now you can see that this import is not valid because that file doesn't really exist. So we're going to just import SQLITE 3 again, save, and just rerun it. Once we have imported the file correctly, we need to create a database. We don't have the database created just yet, so we need to build it. Let me just do this. All right. In my Visual Studio application, you can see that I don't have anything for SQLITE, so we're going to add it together. I just uninstall it. Click on this icon and type SQLITE. You will have this option. And this option here just allows us to interact with a SQL database directly from VS Code. I already have installed this, so we just enable it now. You don't have to do this if this is the first time you are just running that. So now it has been enabled, and then I can just close it, and it's ready for me to work on it. The next thing we need to do is we need to create a database. So in our script, I will just take the terminal away because I'm not using it for now. So we just close it. And I will also close that. All right, so let's create a database, and I will put some comments, and that's the way we do comments in Python. So we're just going to say database. Some lines, and I create a variable called db, and this will point to SQLITE 3, and we're going to connect to a database. The name of the database that I will pass here can be literally anything you want to name your database. I will call it data.db. You can call it company.db or whatever name you want. So data.db. I save it. Now I will show you what I have right here. I will go to the terminal and I'm going to run the command again. As soon as I run the command, you can see that the data.db file was created. And that's because Python connected to SQLITE, to the library, and it created this file for us. The file at the moment doesn't contain anything. It is not even a database. It is just a file with the extension DB. You could call the extension SQLITE if you wanted, SQLITE 3, you can call it SQL if that's what you want. I just call it DB. The extension doesn't really matter for us, but I suggest you use the DB on it. So once we have the connection to the database, we're going to create manually a file here for our SQL commands. So let's create a new file. Let's just call it base.sql. And this base.sql will just contain some SQL commands. Now VS Code tries to install this extension for you. No, we don't want it. We can just close this for now and get rid of that. Let's create a table in SQL so we can see how that's done. And this will be just a simple table, create table, and we will call it, let's call it users, right? Create table users. But what we need to do is we need to create it only if it doesn't exist. So we say create table if not exist users. This table is going to have very basic data. It's going to have an ID and it is going to have a name. The ID usually is auto increment. You will get numbers from 1, 2, 3 and so on, but I don't want to do that. In other databases, the ID has to be an integer, the name has to be a varchar. Don't worry about that. When you do SQLITE, it doesn't really matter which data type you give to it. So just basically do text. Now the ID is going to be text, it's going to be unique, and it cannot be null, so it must contain data. We do a comma, the name is going to be text, it's not going to be unique because names can be repeated, and it's going to be not null because the name must have some data. We also want to define a primary key, even though we're not going to be using this for any relations to foreign keys, but just for you to see how that could be done, we say that the primary key on this table is going to be the ID. And what we need to do now is SQLITE by default will try to create IDs for you. So we say that we do not want SQLITE to create IDs. So we say that we don't want a row ID. We can do a semicolon there, and this should be the base command. Save it. Now let's move back to our database here. If you right click on it, you can see this option that says Open Database. And the reason you're seeing this option here, it is because we installed this extension in VS Code called SQLITE. We just did that before. So let's click on Open Database. And over here, you're going to get this panel. This is opening the data.db file. Now we can just go and say we want to execute a new query, for example. I right click, new query, and over here we want to write the query. I just wrote it here, so I could literally just copy, paste it, and then save it again, and then I can just overwrite base query. Yes, that's fine. So I have the exact same thing. So I hope you understand this, or go back in the video and do it again. It's just now that this DataDB is going to use this base.sql query. To run the query, just so you know, if I refresh, I expand the DataDB, there are no tables in here. I can right click and say run query, or I can also Control-Shift-Q in my computer. I will just click on it. And now the computer is asking me in which file I want to execute this query. And I want to execute the query on the data.db file, which is my database. Select it. And now you get this option popping up. It doesn't tell much to us, but if we refresh, we get the users table with ID and the name. So this base SQL can be closed now. We do have the database created. We do have the users table with 2 columns. Now we need to insert some data. I will hard code a couple of variables. So the ID is going to be unique, and therefore let's import UUID. This UUID will allow us to create unique IDs. So let's test it. I'm going to say that the ID is going to be the UUID, and I want to get UUID 4. Let me just run this to see if I get any errors. I save, and then I will just do py create py again. I don't see any errors, but I don't see the ID, so I will just print ID. Save it again, and I will just run the command again. So this is the ID I am getting out of this UUID. Now we need to get a name. For the name, I will just hard code a name, and the name will be the letter A, B, the letters A, B, and C. I will also print the name. Save it, rerun the command, we get the ID and the name. So the last thing we need to do is we need to run a SQL command so we can insert the name and the ID in the database. So insert data. To insert the data, it's quite simple. You can create a statement. You can call it STMT if you want it. You can also just say query if that's what we want. But in reality, we're not going to get any data out of it. Usually, when you use a database where the ID is auto-generated, then you want to get the last inserted ID. But in this case, we are creating the ID ourselves, so we just want to execute the command against the database. So we say database, let me get rid of the terminal for now, and we are going to execute a command. The command is going to be very simple. We're going to insert into users, and we're going to insert the values. And over here, to make it secure against SQL injections, we're just going to put placeholders. The placeholder for the first question mark is the ID, and the second question mark will be the name. So we do a comma, we open and close parentheses again, and now we pass the ID and we pass the name. First, second. You can do a space if you want. If you just execute it as it is now, the changes are not going to be committed. The insertion is not going to be committed, and therefore you need to do db.commit. This will actually tell the database to save the data. Okay, so let's test it. Before I run this file, I'm going to check the users table again, right click, show table, and you see that there are no results in this users table. So now I'm going to run the file. I will say py create py and expand this a little bit, and here we have an issue. It says that we cannot insert the values ID and name because we are not binding the parameters correctly. There is an unsupported type. The reason you're seeing that message is because this UUID has to be converted into a string, so we're going to cast it to the string, so we do str. Let's save it. Let's run the command again, and there are no mistakes, there are no errors. If we look at the database now, let me just put this back, and then we inspect the table, we can see that we have our first user created right there. So it's a little bit annoying to be opening this and right clicking and saying show table. Therefore, in my base SQL, I will do something else now. I will just close this and that so I don't confuse you. And the table has been created. I no longer need that. So I can just say select all from users. And then I will do Ctrl+Shift+Q, and then I get the users here. You can also right click and run the query and you get the users there. So if I want to insert a new user, I'm going to open the file called create.py. I'm going to run this file in the terminal. Py create.py, no errors, and now I need to see the users there. So therefore I just Ctrl+Shift+Q. In your computers this is much nicer because you have a lot of space to play with this. So that's how you create a user in a database. In the next part of the video I will show you how we do the reading of it. So let's create a new file. Oh, I was actually reading also, but this was reading via select statement. Now we need to read via a Python script. So create a new file. Let's call it read.py. Please guys, subscribe. You will like the videos that I will do for MongoDB and Postgres too. So for the reading part, and we also need to import. If this was in a whole file, you don't need to keep on importing, but this is in a separate file, so I will import SQLITE 3. I don't need to import the UUID because I'm not going to generate unique IDs. I do need to connect, so I will connect to the database. And if we just look at the file, create, this is how we connect it. So we need SQLITE 3 connect and then the database name. Let's just copy and paste it. Save it. And I suggest that you always test your script right away. So I'm going to test it here. Py. And we're going to test the read.py. There are no mistakes, so I can continue. To read, we need to create a SQL statement again. So this will be just a statement that says select all from users. So let's do that. I'm going to say db execute and the SQL statement select all from users. Let's just run this so you can see what happens. Nothing, because I'm not printing anything. And if I put the results of this statement in a variable, I will call it rows because that's what we want to get. And then I print rows, save it, rerun the command. I can just run it without the ./. Here we have an issue that rows is pointing to something in the database, but we are not really getting anything out of it. So we can say fetch all. Pay attention to the letter A is not capitalized, it's lowercase. So save it, rerun the command, and now you can see that what we get out of it is this data. It is actually an array with I wouldn't say key value pairs, it's actually a tuple here because it's divided with a comma. So we could try to convert this into a JSON object if that's what we want, or we could just leave it as it is. But if we pass this data to a client or via an API, the API will not know how to interpret this and that. So let's convert this into a JSON or an array with JSON objects. The syntax is a little bit tricky, so I'm going to just say that the rows is going to be an array. Inside the array, I'm going to create a dictionary, so that's a dict like so, and I want to transport this value and that value to key value pairs. And this is going to be really tricky, guys. You need to know quite a bit about Python. But what I will show you here is this. I'm going to create a dictionary. I'm going to zip values. So I will leave that open and closing. And then I'm going to literally create a loop inside this array. The loop says for rows, actually we'll just get one row for row in rows. This lesson is not about Python, so I will just give you the line of code and you will see the output of it. If you're curious about it, you can Google how to create a dictionary with zipping data into it. And then I will do the ID and I will do the name. and I will grab a row. So what I'm doing, briefly explaining this to you, I'm going to loop through all the rows. I will grab each of them as a row. So we grab this as a row. That will be this row. And then I will extract the first value into the ID, the second value into the name, and I will create a dictionary for it inside this array. So save it, test it. Now we have an issue. It says that line number 4, which is the dictionary that I built, is not running as expected. So we need to check it, and we say that it's a dictionary, it's the zip, and here is the catch. This ID and this name, they have to be converted into, or they actually expected to be inside an array, because you can have multiple of these elements. You can have one key, another key, and so on. I hope that's the only bug. Let me just rerun the file. Same thing again. Take zip, they did the name, and I think I have this as an extra, actually parentheses that shouldn't be there, it should be right there. Sorry guys if I am confusing you a little bit, but this is the output, the final result. Let me just rerun it. So this is what we get out, an array with JSON objects, the first object and the second object. This is tricky. It's hard to explain it right now because I'm concentrating into the SQL part. So this is how we guys read data from the database. You can add a limit in here, you can pass variables to it, that will be up to you. Let's go to the next part of the video. We have the create, we have the read. Now we're going to update a user. So these are the users. I will just copy this ID for now. I'll probably not, because I will be copying other part of the code. Let's create a new file. Let's call it update.py. And I will just copy what I have from one of the other files, from the read file, for example. Paste it. So I will import SQLITE, I will connect to it, and when I update, I'm not going to fetch all. Actually, when I am going to update something, I just want to see how many elements were updated. That will be the idea of it. This is not needed, and that's not needed. So we say that we want to execute a command, and this is going to be update set where. We're going to update users. We're going to set the name to be a placeholder where the ID equals a placeholder. And this command, it's kind of the same command as this one. So we create the execute part and then we pass the placeholders in between it. So this will be the execute command. And then we do a comma, and then we want to pass the ID and the name. We don't have the ID, so we just grab it from the terminal. This is the ID that I want to update. So I will just copy it. And pay attention to the name is ABC, by the way. So the ID will be, I will break this into lines so you can see it. That ID and the name will be the name. Now I will change it to GHJ. I will save it. Remember that we need to commit. So once we commit it, the execution of this command will take place in the database. Let's open the terminal. Let's point to py, update.py. We don't need this, that's coming automatically. So hopefully it has been updated. This has to be in the database now. So we'll open the base SQL, right click, and I will run the query. And it's not there. It's just ABC. I don't see the updated command, but I don't see any mistakes either here. So the issue I'm seeing here is that placeholders respect the element in which I declare them. So the name is the first element and the ID is the second element, and you can see what I'm doing here. I'm flipping the values around. So the name should be the first element and the ID is going to be the second element. Save it, run the command again. I don't see any issues. Let's run the query, and now you can see that the data has been updated successfully. Now let's go to the delete file. Let's create a new file, call it delete.py, and we're going to copy just these commands, put it inside the delete. We import, we connect to the database, and now we're going to delete where the ID is and a specific ID. This is the element that contains these values, just for you to remember it, GHJ. So we change the command now. I will say delete from users where the ID equals question mark. That means that the first argument that I pass inside the parentheses is going to be the ID. Break this into lines so you can see it. Then I will commit. If we check the values in the database, we can see that we do have JHJ. So now I'm going to try to run the delete command. I will save it. I will run the delete.py. Click enter. We have an issue in line number 3. It is because this command is not valid. Let's check it. Delete from users where ID equals question mark. Let me quickly zoom out just for a second to see if I am opening and closing the parentheses correctly compared to the parentheses that I had there. So it seems that that's correct. I have two parentheses, I have two parentheses, I have one, I have one. It seems that this is fine, but we have an issue, and you will have these two. When you read the message here, it says that the incorrect number of bindings supplied. And we are seeing this because this here has to be interpreted as a string. So I could do the string there, or, so I take it back, guys. It's not because that's a string because I'm using quotes. It is actually a string. I see the issue here. Let me just zoom in again, close this. I don't want you to lose the zooming that I had before. And I can see that the issue is that Python uses in between these parentheses what's known as a tuple. I think the spelling of it is this. And even though this is the string that represents the ID, we need to append a comma to the end, so Python knows that this is going to be this first argument, because tuples come in sets of twos. Go and read more about it if you're interested about learning how this is taking place. I think that's the issue. Let me check it. I will just save it. Take this tuple away for now there. Save it again. And then I will run py delete py. I don't see any box. I will run the query. And now we can see that the JHG is deleted. So that element no longer exists. All right, guys, so I cover a bunch of basic stuff. This is really tricky. You will forget it. I forget it many times. Just remember the trailing comma at the end of the tuple. I hope you guys like the video. Please subscribe again. I cannot emphasize it more. Just go ahead, subscribe. I will show you how to do the exact same thing with MongoDB, and I will keep on popping up these videos with new information on how to create, for example, a RESTful API in which we validate the data, and we also have to take care of the routing parts. So we have get, post, puts, and deletes. Well, guys, thank you for watching this video, and the next videos are coming soon.